Hello, welcome to it. This is TJ Didzer, Senior News Editor for Shacknews.com, joined by Will Borger. I know who you are, but Will, why don't you tell the people who you are?
Hi, so I am a games writing freelancer. I have worked for IGN, Shack, Tech Radar, PC Games, and a bunch of different places. Primarily known for my fighting game coverage, but I have covered everything. I've been doing this for about 10 years. That's
And
me.
and speaking of fighting game coverage, you and I both had the pleasure of attending EVO 2024 this year, working out there a little bit, playing out there, and just overall just taking it all in. And we're going to be taking a deep dive into just like everything that was EVO 2024 this year, like our thoughts on it, what we think could have been better, what didn't work, what did work, and kind of just the whole rundown. And I think one of the best places to start for this is talking about the venue change this year, because that was like the big deal. They finally moved out of Mandalay Bay after so many years. I think they had been there since at least 2016, 2015.
Yeah, it had been a long time.
And this was the year that they moved to the Las Vegas Convention Center, which I have I have mixed feelings about it, like pros and cons about it. But what did you think of it?
I thought it was great. I thought it was. I mean, feelings mixed overall, net positive. I think one of the great things about it was that there was more space for the kind of booths and artist alley and all that stuff. Mandalay Bay, especially last year, was very crowded, and so it was easier to go see a game and sit down at one of the stages and see where everything was. And I think it also felt less cramped as a competitor when you had to go to your pool. So I think that part was really good. It definitely felt more spacious.
For sure, it was easier to move around in general. I didn't feel like nut to butt at any point. It was pretty spread out. There was a lot of room to maneuver between tables, uh, and the like booth floor was also it I think also benefited from that space because they weren't just like packed up against each other where you had lines that were like flowing into other booth areas where
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah. And one of the things that was like weird to me from the get-go was that they put the finals in the same floor as the tournament with just a curtain partition set up between the tournament floor and the finals area.
Hmm.
And that seemed to be where the biggest problems came for EVO 2024 this year. Um, our EIC Asif Khan, like when he was looking at the video that I sent back to him from that venue, he noticed like right away he's big into music that like the acoustics of having it on the show floor with just a curtain there weren't great. Like it didn't reverberate very well, and like it had like no echo to it. So he was saying that his when he was viewing it from home, it was like it sounded drowned out to him.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's probably true. I think I noticed that in a couple places. We when we were watching on finals day, we had pretty good seats because the media row is the sixth row, right? They kind of just left side sixth row. That's you guys. Nobody else gets to sit there. But I noticed it was a lot harder to hear the intro music for the top sixes. I noticed that it was a little more difficult to figure out, not figure out, but like when there were the big pops, right? They didn't pop the way that it did in the arena last year. You didn't get kind of the reverb, the cheering. It was there, especially if you were close to the stage like we were, because then everybody's behind you and or in front of you. But if you were in the back in the bleachers, which is where I watched part of, I want to say, the MK top six and some other stuff, it definitely wasn't as loud. So it was harder to hear stuff. If you were back there, it was harder to see stuff than I think it was in Mandalay Bay if you were all the way in the back. So I think it kind of a mixed thing. Part of me is like, it's really nice to be able to just walk out back onto the show floor and be like, I want to buy something. I forgot I wanted to buy this thing. Let me go buy it real quick. Or I want to go look at this stuff. Or maybe I'm not interested in this game. Let me go get some food, whatever it is. But it was also Like there was definitely a trade-off to having everything connected as opposed to being like, listen, on this day it's just the arena.
Yeah, and I know that that was kind of a priority for them, was making finals and the convention event itself feel like a seamless experience.
Hmm.
Um, the problem with, well, we'll get to the problem with that later, being that they completely underestimated seating by a long margin. But
Yeah.
for right now, let's talk a little bit about competition out there. Obviously, the biggest reason to be at EVO is fighting games, fighting games, fighting games, throwing down with people from around the world. Uh, what did you think of the game spread this year, as well as like being able to be there and compete in it?
I mean, I thought the spread was really good because you have the community tournaments, which are always awesome, well organized. It's great to see stuff like Soul Calibur 6 or Plus R get spin, uh, in a way that they still get like a big stage when they're doing their finals, right? And people get to come and watch, and they're not just all in like a pool. So I thought that was great. I thought the selections this year were really good. I really liked that they chose Third Strike as the retro game. Obviously, the 20th anniversary of EVO Moment 37, so you kind of got it right. But that is not an easy game to have setups for because it's never really been properly re-released on like modern hardware. The Street Fighter 30th Anniversary Edition doesn't count. There's too much input delay. It doesn't work the way that it should. So they had these big like CRT monitors, basically like old arcade monitors you could plug your stuff right into, and it was great. But a lot of them also, like I think two of them in my pool failed while I was there. So it was great to see that stuff and great that they're doing it. But I think the competition was really good. It was really spread out. You had enough room at the pools. People could come watch. That was one of my most fun things was when I wasn't playing, watching people play. But I thought the game selection was great. I would love to see. I think the saddest thing for me about modern Evo is that finals day is top sixes, not top eights. That to me is like the biggest disappointment. But as far as the way the setup was run, really efficient. Pools mostly ran on time. It's hard to run a tournament that big.
Yeah, and like I fully agree with you at the top six. I know they did that as part of like a way to keep things moving along as far as time wise, but they kind of ended up running behind a bit anyways, just because the third strike setups were they got delayed by having to set up the third strike setups on the final stage,
Mhm.
which nothing against third strike, they did a great job with it because a lot of what we were seeing there was homebrew stuff. Like those monitors were homebrew, those the ROM files that they had set up for them were homebrew on this like it looked like a 90s water gun the way the cartridge looked with the translucent plastic and the card in
Yeah.
there. So props to them for figuring out how to put all of that together for like 1,000 competitors worth of fights. But
Mhm.
I miss having the full top eight. It feels strange to do top six and still reward the top eight, but the two last guys don't get to be there on the main stage.
Yeah, and I think that's like the thing that gets me is like obviously if you make top eight at Evo, it's still a big deal. Like you still get paid. It's still for like scoring for a world tour, whether that's Arc or Capcom or Tekken World Tour, like you still get points. But it sucks because A, it just makes the bracket kind of awkward because you have two guys in losers and four guys in winners. And then B, it's also it just sucks that those guys don't get to be on the main stage, right? Like to work that hard and to be like especially in something like Street Fighter where you have 1,000 people, or Tekken where you have 4,000 people. Gear had like 20, about 2,000, I think, this year. Like when the bracket is that big and you have to play that many games to get there, they deserve to have a moment on the stage, right? And that's kind of pulled away in a way that it's not really at other majors, and I think that's probably for the best. But it does like I don't know if I made top eight. I'd feel, but I didn't like get to be on. I was like out at seventh. I'd feel really bad.
Right. And like I had that feeling kind of twice where I almost got out of pools, but I just barely missed it. You on the other hand did. You got out in well, it was Guilty Gear.
Yes, I got out in Guilty Gear. That was my goal this year. And if you get out, you get a. I know it's a little bit dark in my because it's late here in New York, but you get a nice little Chipotle card here. So this is my Chipotle card, which is never getting spent. This is my souvenir.
That is the
Um,
That is the prize. That is the take home. The best souvenir that you can't just buy.
Yeah, I bought a new stick. I have like some cool stuff from some of this backstage stuff that we got to do as press, but this was the goal this year was get out of my first pool, and I did. And if you've never played pools at a fighting game before at a big tournament, mostly you just go and you sit down and you play, and you keep playing until the pool is done or you're eliminated. I know when you were trying to get out of pools and Strive, I think you played like 5 games straight at
Mm-hmm.
one point.
Yeah.
They were like, "Don't even get up," and they just bring the other guy.
Yeah. This year convinced me that I hate pools after 6 p.m. I hate them. I'm so tired and my feet hurt so badly by that point. And everybody had, like, I wanted to use the restroom, but there was a line like 2 miles long outside of the main restroom in the convention hall. And I just had to sit down and play with it. And that was the grindiest pool I've ever played at any tournament. Like, as far as just like how hard it was to like keep my mental up and keep the determination up and just push past like the pain in my feet, the pain in my bladder, the pain of the exhaustion of just running around all day long. Man, PM pools are awful.
Yeah, no. As someone, most of my pools were AM pools. No, my third strike pool was in the morning, but my gear pool was I think an hour earlier than yours, and then my Tekken pool was at 2. But it is really weird because especially like if you are not covering anything, if you're not there as a journalist, and your first pool is at 7, it's just kind of like, guess I'll walk around,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
play some casuals, look at Artist Alley, see if my friends are playing. But yeah, and the other thing is, it's weird getting used to these other setups. I remember, I think it was on my winners finals game in my pool, I couldn't get the audio to work in the headsets, and I do a lot of confirms based on audio,
yeah.
not on seeing it. And so I was like, listen, we had to spend like 5 minutes trying to get the audio to
I
work.
remember that. I watched it happen.
Yeah.
The monitors were not cooperating.
Yeah, well, see, what it turns out was, and we figured this out after the fact, was because the other guy had brought headphones that could plug into his pad. When he did that, that pulled the headphone audio out of the monitor. So neither of the monitor headphones. It wasn't the monitor. It was what he was doing, and we finally were like, "Oh, like no, you can't do that." Like, not the guy's fault. I don't think anybody knew,
Mm.
but it was one of those. It's one of those like technical difficulties things. I remember, you had a PS4 that was trying to like connect to the internet and it wasn't having any luck.
That was in my Granblue match, and it pissed the other guy. Like, I was getting pissed because I thought he was hitting the share button on his thing because I couldn't see what it kept coming up and going away real fast.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought he was hitting the share button on his controller, and I knew it wasn't me because, fun fact, I removed the share button from my controller so my thumbs don't wander and I don't hit them.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't him. It was the thing trying to get on PlayStation Network, which, like, there was another thing that happened where, like, I on one of my pools, the monitors weren't even on when we got there. Like, they had us like turn them on and configure them for it. It's like, that's not my job. That should be somebody
Yeah,
else.
that should be done. I will say that I thought the pools that I were in were run pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
I know you had a kind of an issue on one of yours, but uh, for the most part, like I think it's as someone who runs a bracket every week when we can, like running a bracket is hard. It is time consuming. It takes effort. You have to make sure you don't write the wrong thing, especially if you're on pen and paper, which a lot of them were, and then they would get put into start.gg after. So I think there's this, like, especially with pools that are that big, where it's like 16 people or whatever,
Yeah.
and a lot of people don't show up. I thought by and large it ran really well, and I didn't see as much hardware failure this year. Last year the PS5s were overheating,
Yeah.
like just constant and melting people's, USB cords and all this stuff. So, that part worked good.
I think we're at a point with EVO where it's gotten so big that this whole doing brackets by paper thing is like Stone Age and impractical, and they probably shouldn't be doing it that way anymore. Just because it's so much easier to just take a name, poke it, and like put the number on it and send it forward, as
Yeah.
opposed to like what 10,000 competitors. So that's at least like five. And I imagine, like, I don't know, like for as many brackets as they have to run, to manage and organize that many papers and make sure everything runs smoothly, which it didn't at times, I think that's kind of part of the problem.
Yeah, I think it's I understand why they do it. It's because they want to have people like who are, in charge of managing like X number of pools, right? Come in and do the stuff and start GG manually. And they don't want like somebody in the whose just job is to just run the pool, like put in a wrong number or do whatever it is. But I've also seen a lot of people being like, oops, like let me erase this, right? So it's kind of a mixed thing, and that's kind of the like Evo is in this weird growing pain situation where it has become so big that it's like, all right, they went to the new convention center this year. In a couple years, it's going to be too big. It's already like they don't have as much extra room as you would think that they would have. I mean, they have room, right? Like it's not like they're not hurting for space, but in a couple more years, as more people come, I don't think that's going to be true. So you have the tech that you have to worry about. You have reporting you have to worry about. You have how many people can we put in here at a time? How many booths? How many pools? You know, it seems like a technical nightmare to produce, and I would not want to be in charge of it.
Yeah. And like to the sense of like, and so let me, in regards to that, as far as just like the technical side, the execution, do you feel like PlayStation is putting enough into like manpower into this as far as like what it takes to run their equipment and make sure that everything is executed properly and make sure that someone is on hand to make sure that tech issues don't become a problem?
It's hard to say without seeing like I feel like you'd have to be really in the weeds at Evo, like helping to run it to be like, all right, this is how many, failures we had. This is all this stuff. But it feels to me like it's more or less working. And I part of me wonders how invested Sony is in this, right? Like they own it clearly. They provide the consoles. But Evo still feels very much to me as though it's run by the guys who run Evo and not Sony. So if it is, then it's like, all right, well, how hands on are they? It seems to me like they mostly just kind of like, we're going to give you the resources, you guys do what you need to do. So I would encourage them to keep doing that because I think the thing that makes Evo cool is it doesn't feel like a corporate event. Like it's not like esports in other communities, right? Where it's like guys in suits and you can't say this and all, like that's not what the FGC is. And
Mm-hmm.
they've managed to keep that feeling alive despite the fact that Sony owns it.
I agree with that. I think I think you got to have like the FGC top to bottom running the execution of most of it. I think the only thing that I would want is maybe like Sony needs to put in more people tech wise to make sure that when things go sour, there's somebody that they can call over immediately that knows what they're doing and knows how to set it up right away.
Mm-hmm.
Because this isn't the first year that we've had Sony equipment tech issues. Last year was the year we found out that the heat on the PS5 melts USB inputs.
Right,
Um,
and that the front ports have input lag.
and so it's I think there's got to be like sort of a medium where like you still have the SGC running most of that stuff, but Sony needs to put more tech people on the floor.
Yeah, I mean, I think also like I don't want to get in trouble, but I think part of it is just the way the PS5 is designed, right? Like I don't think they really designed it with the idea of like we're gonna have several hundred to 1,000 of these at an event so people can play fighting games, right? And I think that hopefully now that they own Evo and they've owned Evo for several years, like whatever the next console is, that will be part of the discussion. Well, at Evo, right? Because they're gonna have to. And now that it's kind of become the de facto fighting game console, like you kind of need that. The PS4 was great because you could drop those things off a roof and they would still work,
Hmm.
you know. But like the PS5 is, it's it's got fins, man. It's like a 50s Cadillac. I don't know what they were doing here, but it makes it awful to transport. And then you have the heat, and I don't know. So I hope that they improve the tech there, and they need people to be on deck. But I think the core problem is one of like this isn't designed to do the thing that we're asking it to do.
Yeah. I have always felt that the PS5 is like somebody was playing a lot of Dead Space and thought and saw the marker and thought this would make a good console.
Yeah, right. Like, what if my wife and I jokingly call it the Guggenheim,
Hmm.
because it actually kind of looks like the Guggenheim. Uh, but like, yeah, it's part of me, I understand why the Xbox no longer is like the default console for fighting games, but when you look at like the Series X, right, or the Series S, it's just a brick. It's literally just a brick,
Hmm.
and I think that something like that would probably be better for what EVO is, or what CEO is, or Combo Breaker, any of the infinite majors that are now running on
Yeah.
Sony hardware.
And speaking of like Sony and all that stuff, like let's talk a little bit about the actual convention floor, the stuff that was there for people to visit, play, and kind of just the experience on the sort of show floor side of it. What did you think of the booths? The booths this year? Man, I had a hard time with that one.
I thought they were better than last year. Last year I almost bought a snack box, and I think I was at Arcade Shock, and I was waiting in line, and the line had gotten so long that it wrapped around the booth and was like getting in the way of the other booths. This year they felt a lot more spread out. You could just go up to them. Artist Alley was organized in such a way that it was. I want to describe it as like a typical convention, and I mean that in a good way, where it's easy to see where stuff is, right? And they had like a nice little floor map, and it's like here's this thing, which was super helpful if you were looking for something, because I wanted to go buy a new Obsidian, which I did. It's over there in the box, but I had to figure out the place that was selling it. So I think that part was really good, and I thought the Artist Alley stuff was great. I thought it was awesome that they had so many people from the community there who were selling not only fighting game stuff but like gaming stuff. Like you saw that Elden Ring artwork that one guy was doing, beautiful posters with these very elaborate, sequences. So I thought it was good. I thought it was great that you could buy controllers there. I thought it was great that you could buy parts there, get customization. That part to me is awesome. And like Quanba had a booth. All these companies that are part of the FGC had a booth. Riot had a booth. Big 2XKO turnout there. Bandai Namco had a booth. So I thought they did a good job of like being like, hey, exhibitors, if you want to show your stuff, like if you're Riot, if you're Bandai Namco, if you're Arxis, we're going to have space for you, absolutely. But we're also going to have a lot of space for the Artist Alley folks too.
Yeah. I think in a time when we have no more E3, rest in peace, um, the convention floor side of EVO is about as close as I get to that feeling anymore. The booths have become awesome at EVO. Like the the SNK booth with like the picture opportunities and like the gameplay setups and all that stuff. The Arc System Works. They had the wall the wall splat design where you like do your best
Yeah.
wall splat pose. I thought that was fun. Riot had an awesome sprawling booth out there. Red Bull had it was Chipotle. Chipotle had a great booth in the middle that was just there for sitting down, and I loved that.
Yeah. That was really helpful.
And I think everybody just kind of upped their presentation game on a big level. I remember when I walked in and I saw the Bandai Namco booth with the life size Goku and Jiren fighting. I was just like, wow, this would be right at home at E3 if it were still around. And
Yeah. Yeah.
it's impressive just how much everybody that's presenting out there has stepped up their game. And then just like the Evo stuff itself has gotten even more sprawling and even cooler. I really always appreciate Mark Julio's arcade fighting stick museum. It's gotten bigger and bigger every year, and he puts cooler and cooler stuff in there. This year he had exhibits where he paired fighting sticks up with sneakers because he's a sneakerhead, and that was cool to see. And then they did like the whole museum of every one of their main games, like fighting game art from the official artworks throughout the entire series of each game, and all of it was like just dope, top to bottom to see.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that doesn't get enough love that should get enough love, and I didn't get to see as much of that stuff as I wanted because I was going to appointments and I was competing and I was watching you guys compete, and that to me is Evo. But I think it's awesome that even if you don't compete, there is something for you to do, right? There is something for you to feel like you're a part of the event. You can go around, you can play the new games, you can see what the publishers are working on. You can see Harada give an interview with. Like talking about a new promotion that they're doing at Bandai Namco. All of that is awesome, but the thing to me that makes it really cool is A, how many more casual setups there were this year and how easy they were to find. Like you can just go, you can play your game, right? And the arcade with real machines,
Yeah.
right? That's some of these are very old, and you can tell that, like if you've ever, worked in an arcade or tried to maintain an arcade machine, it's very expensive and it's not easy to do. It requires a lot of work. And to see that they had brought out all these classic machines that people could go play, whether it was like a fighting game or it was DDR or whatever it was, there was something for you to do. And I think that's really awesome because Evo isn't just about competition, like it's about bringing the FGC together in one place.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a celebration of what that means. So it can't just be here's some boosts, here's some casuals. It has to be like everything that makes the FGC, and what could be more FGC than playing in an arcade.
Yeah. I took a good long walk through there, and I saw, to my utter shock, Guilty Gear XX Accent Core and Arc System Works' lesser known Fist of the North Star Fighter, which both of those were just a delight to see. I never actually got to get on the Fist of the North Star. I'm hoping to find that one again next year, but that is a hilariously fun game.
Yeah.
And just like the sheer amount of games they had in there, from things like gimmick games like Silent Scope and like dancing and pattern games, to fighting games, to puzzle games, to just everything under the sun that they could get their hands on. It was like a proper, like, galloping ghost in there.
Yeah, and I think and this is I'm old, right? Like I grew up in arcades. Like arcades mean a lot to me from a perspective of like this is where I spent a lot of time as a kid, right, with my friends playing these games that built this love of this genre and what it means to come together and play fighting games. And I think it's really cool that for a lot of people they're not going to get to go to an arcade because there isn't one near their house. I can go to New York City. I can go to like a barcade, and they're really good. They're well maintained. You can buy beer. You can have a good time. You can punch buddy's face in the Street Fighter. But for most people, that might be their first ever arcade. And I think that that's something that the FGC has gotten really cognizant of in the last few years, that like we have to do something to keep this thing alive, right? You see developers putting in like mini arcades into their games like Tekken or Street Fighter or what looks like it's going to be into XKO. Guilty Gear's doing the same thing. And, people complain sometimes about the functionality of those lobbies, but the reason that they're there and the reason the arcade is there at EVO is because it's trying to preserve what it was like to be in a space. And I can't imagine it's cheap to do. I can't imagine it's easy to do. It must be a logistical nightmare. But I'm so thankful that they do it, and I hope that they will keep doing it.
For sure. And coming into perhaps one of the most important parts of it, like, let's talk more about the finals. We kind of have to address the elephant in the room right away. They sold like 30,000 tickets to a 20,000 seat floor. And
yeah,
like, I don't know that I understand how that happens, but it feels
like overbooking on flights, right?
Yeah, like and I wonder how much of it was last minute changes that they couldn't prepare for, because you and I also talked about this when we were out there. It felt like they were supposed to have things at a different hall, and they ended up at the West Hall. I feel like they were gonna probably have more space and they had planned around that, but it didn't work out that way. That said, they left a lot of spectators out in the convention floor because at some point the fire marshal got involved and said you can't let any more people in, and so they had a long line of folks that were just being turned away. Our good friend Joseph Bradford, who works over at MMORPG, he was working press, but his daughter was out there with him, and she could not get in because they were at capacity. And I just think that sucks. And this is another part of it is like Evo has gotten expensive.
It is very expensive now. Yeah.
Like even if you're not competing in any of the games, it's $200 just to be there.
Yeah.
And that's not including hotel, that's not including lodging, that's not including food. That's just $200 to be on the floor.
To walk into the building. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I think I'm of two minds about it, right? I think, on the one hand, I think bundling everything together as this is your ticket, this gets you everything. That's awesome, right? Like, that is great for everybody. Because previously, if you couldn't get a finals day ticket, you just couldn't go, right? And if you were, like, a last minute, like, I want to go to EVO, like, if I had not been pressed last year, when I first went to EVO physically, I would not have been able to sit in the finals arena. And I would have been really sad. But because I was in, right? But this year, when before I knew I was going to go as press, I knew I was just going to go as me, have a good time, play some games. I didn't have to worry about it. I bought my ticket. I'm in, right? And that's awesome. I think the additional cost in that case is reasonable because everybody gets the opportunity to go to the finals arena. What I think sucks is, yeah, it is expensive. And if they clearly didn't have enough space. I remember walking into what was going to be the finals arena, like, I think on Friday or Saturday, and being like, looking at the seat layout and being like, there's not enough space here. Like, there's just, compared to what was, I think, at Mandalay Bay. Mandalay Bay felt bigger in that venue, that specific venue, nowhere else. But, and I told people, Bro had trouble getting back in. Joseph had trouble getting back in. Like, if you sit down, do not leave. Right. And to their credit, they had restrooms, they had food there. If you're going to be there all day, you could make it. But I think part of it is, like, as someone who used to work in a theme park, like, there's no way you can plan for capacity that's that big. Right. It's impossible. But it's EVO, and they kind of know how big it's going to be. So it's like, I don't know. They got to do something. But how do you do that without losing the niceness of just being able to walk back onto the floor and go look at Artist Alley? I don't know. It's really complicated. I think it's hard, and I don't know what they're going to do, and I don't envy the person who has to make that decision.
Yeah. Like, off the top of my head, it doesn't do anything for the acoustics, but they just need to move that curtain maybe, like, 20 to 30 feet more back onto the tournament floor. Yeah, we lose some space on the tournament floor, but we have so much out there right now that I don't think that's a bad compromise.
No, and there was a big gap between where the last pools were, the last pool setups, and the actual curtain, right? So I think you could do that. I think if you really cared about the acoustics, you could have, like, a fake wall that you set up. That would be difficult, right? That would take more time. But if you really wanted to preserve, like, that thing, you could do that. Maybe, like, put a curtain at the top. I think there's ways to do it, but, it also has to be said that this is their first time in a new venue, and that's really hard. Whenever you have a change like that, you have to do everything. Everything is the first time, right? Mm-hmm. And I think, all things considered, it actually worked really well for the first time in a new space with that many people there. I think they did a really good job. I think there's obviously room for improvement, and I think the other thing that we need to talk about was when they lost connection, and this is a technical difficulty, this is going to happen, but when the people who were outside, they were streaming the finals on all the other setups, like all the other screens, which is great, awesome, good decision. But then they lost picture for, like,
yeah.
I don't know, it's a while, yeah.
They had audio only for about 30 minutes, I know.
Yeah, and again, that is a technical issue, and that is going to happen whenever you go into a new space. That's going to happen regardless, like, that much stuff, that much wiring, that many people, you're going to have errors.
Mm-hmm.
But I think you can mitigate some of that if the finals arena is bigger and more people can come sit, right?
Yeah. So, what did you think of I guess, the flow of the finals this year? Like, not only the matches and the introductions and like the stats on the players. What do you think of the in between like between innings gimmicks as well?
I think it's always fun when they do the PS5 giveaways. Um, I think you want to play RPS against Justin Wong is a fun thing. Um, I love when I think it was last year, they did Will It Kill
Yeah,
with Sage. That was awesome. I actually went like I think 5-0 in Will It Kill. Um, I did not win RPS against Justin Wong, but I think that stuff is fun, and I think it keeps the crowd entertained because there's a lot of stuff that has to go on behind the scenes when you transition from game to game, whenever whatever it is, right? You have to bring the players in, get them ready to go out, make sure that they have an area where they can practice, get the old players out, do whatever you need to go do with them, get them to the press room, whatever they need to go do to take pictures. So I thought that it was good. And I thought that the crowd really vibed with it. Everyone every time the Chipotle ad came on, people started cheering. So I don't know. I think that's a hard balance to strike, right? Because you also have to have time for like advertising breaks on the Twitch stream, but you also have to make sure that the people who are paying $200 to be there are having a good time.
yeah.
So I thought they did a good job. What did you think?
I remember a heavy complaint in EVO 2023 was that the gimmicks and the in betweens between matches were running too long, and for people that were watching the stream at home, a few of my buddies, they were kind of pissed about how long it was taking for them to get back to matches between like the Chipotle segments and all that stuff. Which I understand, it's sponsorships, and you gotta get that going. It's like it brings in extra money for them. I do, however, think that this year they did a better job of mitigating the time that they spent on that stuff compared to talking about the players, putting matches up, getting things going, and then letting people do their celebrations, moving on to the next thing. I thought that they felt more streamlined with all of that stuff than they were in 2023.
Yeah, I thought, I think the other thing that they did that maybe this is just me imagining it. I thought that they broke it up better, right? It was like we're gonna have our like 3 minute, 5 minute thing ad break, right? And we're gonna play some more, and we're gonna do another ad. It wasn't like you never had like 15-minute segments, right? Where it was like maybe between games when they were getting everything set up for the next one. Then yes, but never like during a top eight, right? Like it felt like the top eights or the top sixes, that they were moving at a good pace. And while that stuff was there, it was always like I think they paced it really well. It was like, okay, really hype match. Everybody needs a second.
Yeah,
Cool. Let's watch a Chipotle ad. Here's some more top six.
more killer, less filler.
Yeah,
That's what it
exactly.
felt like this year, and it was like it made for a funny moment at the end because they did the "You Are Free Now," but then they immediately cut away to a Chipotle commercial, and it was like if you watch the video, everybody's like, "You are free now" along with it, and then the Chipotle ad pops up, and everyone's like, "Yeah!" It's
I think, yeah, it was great.
it's almost comedic in its timing.
Yeah. I think the other thing is, right, like finding the right, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, but like finding the right tone, right? Like Evo is weirdly become like through a series of events that I don't think anybody who initially ran like Battle by the Bay could have foreseen, right? Like kind of the face of the FGC. So it has to be right. It has to have the tone. And it has to be that way when it's owned by a console manufacturer. It has to be that way when it's, you know, got a Chipotle advertisement. It has to be that way all the time. And they're managing that stuff really well, which is not easy to do. So I think, not only the pacing, but just like what you're doing at any given moment. Like that never feels fake or wrong or out of place.
For sure. So, wrapping up a little bit, like, what would you give it a grade of if you were to just, like, take everything that was put together for EVO 2024, from the layout to the presentation to the execution to the games, competing, watching, everything together, A through F?
So I think it would be a little bit different if you were outside and you had lost video for 30 minutes, like that would suck, right? But from my experience, right, I'd give it like a 9. I think, and it depends on what you run into, right? If you run into technical issues in your pool that the way that you did, that sucks. I've never had anything as bad as what you were dealing with. But Evo to me, and the first time I went was last year, and the first time I competed was 2 years ago when it was Evo Online. Like walking into that arena is like it's a magical experience, right? And that may be like a cliche, but it's like it feels like you are stepping in a place where you belong and you are welcome just by being a member of the FGC. And I think that is still there. I don't see any signs of that going away. I think all things considered, especially new building, they were running pure PS5s this year. They were doing that really complicated stuff with Third Strike. Um, Big venue, more space. I think as like a first shot in a new place, it was a home run. I think there's places they can improve, absolutely. As a competitor, I think it was the best experience that I've had just because the pools were farther laid out. They timed us out really nicely, so I wasn't like rushing from one pool to the other. I had time. I loved how many bathrooms there were in the arena, just little things like that. Um, and the other thing is like the FGC itself has to be talked about because everybody there that I ran into at Evo was really cool, right? Like I'd be watching you play or watching somebody else play, and I'd be chatting with some other guy, being like, "You still in?" Like I was rooting for the guy who knocked me out of the pool in Third Strike
Yeah.
because I wanted him to get out of the pool because like we'd been talking, right? So I think having an environment that builds that cannot be overstated, and going and doing that in a new building with all these other new challenges, the fact that that's still there, that's really important. So I'd give it a 9.
I would probably go for a B plus A minus here, and mostly because of the rough situation that happened with the finals spectator seating.
Mm-hmm.
There was a few other things that just kind of brushed my fur backwards a little bit. I do agree with you on the spacing. That actually, in my opinion, makes for a better like not just playing, but also standing there and talking to other people and like analyzing games as they're happening. Because you're not back to back with other people. You're not cramped and crowded with other people. I don't like talking to other people when I'm crowded in. It's not fun. So to be able to like stretch and like have space between me and other people while we're watching these matches and enjoying them and taking in like what the crazy stuff that's happening, that's fun. It makes for better conversations and it makes for better celebrations when you see something cool happen.
Yeah, I think for me, like the most fun stuff was when Friday and Saturday, like when one of us, because a bunch of us went that knew each other largely, I think, through the tournament that I run, but like we were all there. We had that big picture of us, and we were all following each other to pools and being like, "All right, your pool is this time. Bet like we'll all be there. We're all cheering you on." I think that like sense of camaraderie would probably not have happened in previous years, not because we didn't want to make it happen, but because it just wasn't enough space for 10 of us to stand, right behind somebody's setup.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that little change makes a big difference.
For sure. Like the things that bug me, obviously the spectator seating. I think they need to bring water stations back to the tournament floor because I noticed that wasn't like a thing this year for some reason. I don't know what it was about that, but like those water stations in 2023 were lifesavers. Not being able to have to leave the floor to go fill up a water bottle and come back was so good. I think that as this tournament grows, they need to figure out a better organizational method for the sheer amount of brackets that they're having to write down, update, and turn in. Like there has to be, I think, some sort of improvement to that. Because as it is now, I think a few too many mistakes are happening, and it's making things last longer. And then finally, I think just for the most part, I agree with you. Like I had some of the most fun I've ever had at Evo this year. It was a very cool floor experience. It was still a pretty good arena experience, despite my qualms. And generally speaking, I thought that like the convention side of it killed it with their presentations this year. So yeah, pretty impressive year. Is there anything else that you want to share on it?
I don't know. I would just say, this is the same thing I say to everybody when if you're listening to this and you're like, man, I want to go to EVO, just go, just go next year, just come. You will have a great time. I don't know a single person who's ever gone to EVO and been like, that sucked. Not once. It's everybody's like, I'm going back. I
Mm-hmm.
have a new goal as a competitor. I want to do this, right? And I think, if you're a longtime FGC person and you've never made the trip, go. There's nothing like getting out of your pool. There's nothing like playing those games, getting used to that environment, seeing those moments that make the top sixes so much fun. That's the other thing. I think we had like some of the best top sixes we've ever had at EVO,
Mm-hmm.
or top eights this year. Like seeing those things live when people jump out of their seats, and the whole arena is, yelling and celebrating and cheering for people. I think that cannot be replicated anywhere else. And you may think you understand what it's like on a Twitch stream, but you don't. So if you want to go, sign up, compete in your favorite game. Even if you go 0-2, you're going to have a good time. Go to EVO. You'll have a good time. Play fighting games. It's good.
100% seconded. Like, it's the electricity in there is like no other, and it's in the hands of people that are going to be making sure that it gets better and better each year.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there it is. As we close this out, like of course, you know me from Shacknews. You can find all of our stuff on shacknews.com. Wilborger, tell the people what you do and where they can find you.
So you can find me if you're looking for fighting game content. I recently did a preview of 2XKO over at IGN. You can also see me at Shacknews. I'm going to have something soon there that is not fighting game related, but I'm very excited for. I've also got, I think that's about it, actually, for the most part. Those are my most recent things. Keep an eye on Shack, keep an eye on IGN. I am working on stuff, but the thing that I would really like people to check out if they've liked this episode is the 2XKO preview, because the more hits that gets, the more we can do it. And that's, I think, the thing that doesn't always come across in games journalism. We get to do this because you guys read it and you guys watch it. So if you like what we do, please support it. That means we get to do more of it and bring you better stuff.
Absolutely, and it's a hard time out there especially in the freelance market. So every little bit of support that you guys give people like Will and everyone else who is out there working on this stuff is much appreciated.
Absolutely. Couldn't have said it better.